were slower when living came easy, and neighbors were friends. Cattle is turning as kids on the river went seeking adventure, or some pirate's den. Miners and fishing and wrestling and wishing the day would come quickly when they would be there. That's where they came from, the time that they came from. No better time to live and to grow. That's where they came from, the days that they came from. Life was so carefree, not so long ago.
I'm Sammy Snyders. I played Tom Sawyer in Huckleberry, Finn and Friends.
Hello, I'm Ian Tracy. I used to play Huckleberry Finn on Huckleberry Finn and Friends. Back in 1979, a German film company joined forces with a Canadian film company to produce a 26-part television series based on the American books by Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
My name is Tom Wagner. I'm the producer of The Adventure of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I must say we were very, very lucky to have Sammy Snyders and Ian Tracy as the two major actors covering Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, it's you, Huck!
The production started, I started filming in 1979, and it took me about a half a year.
Sounds good.
I wanted to have it on the English-speaking market represented. At that time, it was not possible to sell any German product to the market.
Wagner hired Robert Stabler's Madison Pacific Films to produce this great American classic, although almost none of the filming took place in the U.S. at all.
To film in America, it was very expensive, and the Canadian market, on the Canadian dollar, it was for the budget much better to film it over there. Oh, it's very similar, and you have the mountains as well, and you have the Fraser River, which is very similar to the Mississippi, and because of that, it was wonderful to have the opportunity to use the Vancouver scenery for this production.
Not only was the series not filmed in the U.S., but almost all of its cast and crew were also drawn from beyond its borders.
We only used German and Canadian actors.
So in casting these two great American characters, Wagner was to source his actors locally. Well, I guess it all started off back in 1976 when I did my first part as an actor. Eventually, I was able to get a role here and there on some TV drama for the CBC, and after a couple of years of doing some parts, eventually landed the role of Huckleberry Finn, which was a dream job for me, having grown up in the country and not particularly loving to wear shoes. It was a great role for me to get.
Back then, I was just a young little guy starting out in the industry. I was dancing, I was doing small shows and commercials and things like that, and I really wanted to play that role. It was something that I really wanted.
Huck! Huck! Hey, Huck! Wake up! Come on, wake up! Wake up!
Why?
Because it's a great day for a swim. Come on, let's go!
Tom recognized the things in me that he needed for the part, and I literally did grow up in a rural community on a somewhat of a hobby farm with horses and animals, dogs and cats and chickens next door, and with my friends as youngsters, we did live a Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer kind of life. We were often gone all day up the creek fishing and building forts in the woods, and I think most of us had read the book even by that time, and it was a very comfortable fit. And you know, I think the gap tooth had an appeal for them too. You know, I looked like a little bit like a country bumpkin at the time, so I think they were pleased to find me. And combining myself with Sam Snyders, who played Tom Sawyer, he was a very peppy, very witty, high-energy, rambunctious rascal. So the two of us complemented each other very well.
When we were doing the casting process, they were casting across Canada, and I do know that they got down to 2 people. You know, Michael J. Fox was one of them. And myself. And Michael J. Fox opted to go to LA at that time, and I opted to do the show. And I can remember going back through the casting process and going to that audition and keeping my fingers crossed that I'd get this role, this big break.
Do you know, I often think back to those days shooting that show, and it really, you know, after 30 years in the business, I can still reflect on that piece of work as a dream job, because really we were outside for 6 months. I got to miss 2 months of school at either end, you know, at the end of grade 9 and the beginning of grade 10. So I felt, you know, that in itself was a bit of a blessing for a 14-year-old. And we were outside every day, bare feet. You know, a lot of the scenes that we had to do were on river banks with building fires or paddling canoes, actually fishing.
I must say, Ian Tracy is absolutely a Huck Finn. He was a Huck Finn from scratch because he is an expert in fishing. He's an expert in horseback riding. You just don't believe it. He's absolutely was a Huck Finn, as you cannot find any better Huck Finn anywhere. He is excellent. And I must say I was fascinated how good he was.
One of the actors on the show was American, Blue Man Kuma, who played the enslaved Jim.
My name is Blue Man Kuma. I'm an actor, a singer, songwriter, producer, director, and social entrepreneur, as it were.
Morning, Master Tom.
Morning, Jim.
Blue Man Kuma was very, very profiled and excellent as an actor.
By the way, have you seen Huckleberry?
Not since early this morning. He rushed by on his way to buy something he wanted.
He did? What was it he wanted to buy?
Yeah, he didn't say that. But why don't you ask him straight away?
One of my greatest memories is going to the audition and going up the stairs. I ran into Ian coming down the stairs. Now, we had not met, but I think I knew about him. He certainly knew about me. And though we hadn't done much work at that point, he looked at me and he said, "Are you going to audition for Jim?" I said, "Yeah, man." He said, "Oh, man, I hope you get it." Great encouragement from the man himself. So I went up and I did my thing.
It broke me all up. It seemed like the worst thing that could happen.
And it turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Also cast in the show was Canadian actor Alex Dyken.
And I know the other. It's Injun Joe. That's so?
I'd rather it be the devil's a darn sight.
I did Injun Joe 26 years ago.
Now, see here. You required your pay in advance. Now, I've paid you. Yeah, and you done more than that. 5 years ago, you drove me away from your father's kitchen when I asked for something to eat. Now, I swore I'd get even with you. Your father had me jailed for vagrancy. Do you think I'd forget?
How I got the part was I was already living in Toronto and came back to town to find out anything was happening with my old agent. And she said, call up the people in production that were running the Huck Finn and Friends series. I might get some extra work. So I called, and the casting director was looking for me, actually, to read me for Injun Joe. So I got the part and fired my agent.
The cast was a fine array of young Canadian talent. Myself and Sam Snyders and Bernie Colson and the list goes on. You know, Holly Finley, who played Becky Thatcher.
Holly Finley was determined to be Tom's girlfriend.
I do know that every year I get a letter from my sweetheart, a Christmas card. Holly Finley is one of my fondest memories of, I guess, Huckleberry Finn and Friends, because it was my first love scene. And being of a boy of about 12, you know, this was kind of cool. I was going to have a love scene with a very pretty girl. And that's one of my fondest memories. And I still, to this day, get a letter every year from Holly. And I know she's a cook and she's married now. And it's very nice to have good friends on the other side of the country.
But I've never kissed. Well, we have to kiss or we won't be properly engaged. Here, I want you to have something. It's my best treasure in the whole world. Oh, it's beautiful. It's brass, but it's almost gold. Becky? There. Now we're engaged.
It was one of those lucky things. It's one of those one in a million type things where you get the perfect cast. Bridget Horney couldn't do any better than that for a grandmother.
Well, she was perfectly fitting as Aunt
Be
Polly.
quiet.
Oh, that hurts, Aunt Polly!
Well, if you didn't go around brawling like some worthless ragamuffin, here, scrub that messy face, and I mean scrub it.
Bridget Horney was a very famous German actress, and she has done a lot of filming, features.
I can remember doing a scene with her where she had to give me some cod liver oil. And it was just so perfectly played because I was naturally Tom. I was a mischievous child, and that scene with the cod liver oil worked so well because we were perfectly cast.
Don't act like that. This is good for you and won't hurt you a bit. Now, open your mouth.
It was great. We had a handful of German actors, all older, all of the adult characters that came over. Very highly respected actors in Germany, and brought a lot to the project. It was a really diverse group of people and quite an experience.
But now it's time to return to your homes and farms.
I found them to be strange and delightful. I'll put it like that. There's a lot of tradition in the way that they perform. Their work ethic was terrific, and we were great friends.
Working with the German and Canadian cast was really cool. I thought Witter Weeks, having a Germanic accent, was really a tough lady.
There was a little bit of a language barrier that we had, of course, with Bridget, but no, they're acting. All of us, when we came to the set, we were always prepared to work.
Sorry, Sam, but I got to tell the truth, buddy. Sammy wouldn't learn his lines.
Absolutely not.
And Sammy had a lot of lines, man. He was a lead cat.
Yes.
The actual portrayal of Tom Sawyer on camera was credible. He did a wonderful job there. But it behooves actors to learn their lines, folks. And you know what I'm saying?
There were times that we didn't learn our lines, but not for lack of trying.
Ooh.
You have to remember that when you shoot, and you shoot all day long, especially at that age, you know, you want some downtime, and there was no downtime to be had. We had to keep going.
It's that way!
The film industry does have its pressures on performers, and you know, young kids especially, I guess, there were no rules back then. We didn't have tutors, we didn't have an 8-hour day. We worked like everybody else. We had 14, 15-hour days, and you know, really no breaks.
That's it. Now up the rigging, you lovers! Royals and topsails!
Ian and I had a great relationship on the set. You know, there were times that, like anything else, you always discussed a scene.
In Tom Wagner's notes here, it's got down you quoting, "Sammy is a good kid. Oh, we have our quarrels once in a while, but I think we work very well together. I have a bad temper, but I try to keep it down."
That was a quote of mine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's in it.
So I probably got under his skin a little bit from time to time.
You're bound to have your little bumps and grinds here, especially you know, at 14 when the testosterone is starting to kick in. You know, whether you're on the schoolyard or on the ice playing hockey or shooting a film, you're gonna have your little rows with your mates. Nothing too serious.
Couldn't ask for a better co-star. We both together worked so well.
And as far as having a temper, yeah, I guess that's true. That's a family trait. And, you know, at this age, I've learned to control that, hopefully.
This is it, Jim. Take it downriver. I don't know how we're gonna get around, but we got it. You'll see.
The show was shot in the Vancouver area, mainly along the Fraser River that doubled so well as the Mississippi.
All right, now. Hold it steady.
We shot Huck Finn on the Fraser River, basically from Ladner, which is at the mouth of the river, at the Pacific Ocean, up to Langley, which is out in the more rural valley farmland.
For the parts I was involved in, we were always on the run. And so there was a lot of going down the river on the raft, things like that.
And basically the locations that they tried to find up and down the Fraser River were very old farms, old-looking farms, usually from the turn of the century, which again doubled very well for the period.
I could see the houses in my mind, but where we were, because we took these little roads and then we had to go and then we were all. It was always like Abbotsford, Fort Langley, you know, those remote areas.
Aunt Polly's house was in fact in the USA, just over the border, in a place called Point Roberts. The building is still there today, although it has a new front porch, and the fence that Tom had everyone painting has long since disappeared. We had a studio in North Vancouver up at a place called Panorama Ridge, where basically we had a lot of the indoor sets, the interiors of houses and different buildings.
We tried to go as authentic as possible, continuing right on the Mark Twain books, which I think was a wonderful job done by the directors.
And we also had a street built out behind the studio on the back road, which was, you know, small town scenes, whichever town we were in, they would redecorate it. And also Huck Finn's home was back there, which was a big hogshead, which is a very large-sized barrel cut in half, tipped on its side, and that's where I lived, in my little bunker. All the costumes were made to be authentic, although sometimes we weren't always so happy with the costumes we had to wear.
Oh, no, I ain't wearing no dress.
Now look, huh? Lots of folks know you. Somebody gonna catch you for sure, and then they're gonna come here and catch Jim. Oh, come on, it's the only way.
Guess I got no choice.
Actually, you know, as a 14-year-old putting on a woman's frock, I think they called it, you know, at the time. You know, it came complete with bonnet and petticoat, long dress.
Jim, the last thing I do in the world is wear a dress.
Well, that's why it's a good disguise.
It was a little bit hard to swallow at the time, but, you know, it was fun. You know, they all made fun of us.
Ribbons?
Come on, it's just right.
You know, and I've recently seen a couple of those pictures from the past. It's kind of funny, but, you know, all in the name of a story. So sometimes being an actor, you just gotta swallow your macho side.
That's a fair fit.
Tom and Huck, of course, were always to be barefoot. And we had to build our feet up for this.
When we started the show, it would have been about May. And so having worn shoes all winter, the feet soften up a little bit. But you know, the way we grew up, we were generally in bare feet for most of the summer anyway. It wasn't then like it is now, where parents tend to coddle their kids a little bit more now. But I would say by you know, mid-July, early August, we had feet like leather, and we stopped worrying about it. The feet are a little tender in the morning, but I'd say by 10 a.m. they were back to being leather.
We had solid feet where we were calloused so much that we were walking on anything. I could put cigarette butts out with my foot. Working out in Vancouver was a thrill for me because I love fishing. I love the outdoors. And of course, Ian was the same way. And we often got together and we went horseback riding, or we went up into the mountains. I can remember him and I, there was this glacier field up there. And we said, that's it, we're taking our shoes and socks off. We were Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and we were gonna run up this glacier field all the way to the top and back. Well, we got about halfway. Then we sat down and went, ah! We were so cold.
Often it was the days away from filming that provided for some of the happiest memories for Sammy and me.
I finally decided to give the two boys a break, and we go fishing.
As a kid, I was always interested in wildlife and that, and I did taxidermy. I used to love to, you know, try and mount animals and that.
We went to a place way up north of Canada where all the salmons are coming into the Canadian area.
And I loved it, had time of my life with Ian.
I was very excited. I had never fished before in my life. The boys were wonderful. They had already fished, I think, 2 or 3 of the salmon.
And I caught this mud shark. It was about 3 feet long. It was a mud shark. You know, he was like, let's throw it back, let's throw it back. And I was, no, I've got to keep this thing. I took it home to an apartment that we were living in West Van. And when I threw the shark into the bathtub, it was alive.
We were two definitely very different people. Like I said, he was a very high energy and rambunctious, witty, smart guy. And I think at times, being the quieter version, it actually worked really well for the roles, because Tom Sawyer was the witty, bright plan maker. Huck Finn was a good follower and a good teammate and a man of the woods. So they complemented each other very well, and I think our energies reflected that as well.
I think when people are cast into positions, they are cast because there is a part of that character in them. There was no question that both Ian and I were Tom and Huck Finn. There is no question.
For some of the actors, their roles had a deep personal resonance.
Jim, gosh, I never expected.
Don't hurt me. I never hurt no ghost, ever.
I like to say, as black people, we were not slaves, we were enslaved people, because that's much more humane. And looking at Jim as an enslaved person, I could come to terms with his circumstances and then relate to him.
Why, Jim, whatever is the matter?
My head's been burning something awful. And my back keeps itching.
It's about Huck, isn't it?
Ma'am, Huck's been a good friend to me from time to time. I just hope he ain't hurt none.
It's a hard thing for a black man to look back in the days when people were enslaved in the U.S. and in the free world and call that a great, glorious time. Oh, what fun we had, you see. But in literature, Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain's depiction of the character Jim, that'll live forever.
Tom is down at the jailhouse. He promised to bring back any news as soon as anything happened. Don't you worry, Jim. Everything will be all right.
He did a very humane thing with the man, and there's great dignity in the character. And I found it, and I had fun with it. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
However, some in the cast simply found their roles to be fun.
Injun Joe was the one who grabbed the knife.
Yeah, Injun Joe, I think, was a real hoot. I mean, I like playing bad guys, and I didn't really consider him really a bad guy somehow. You really can't if you're playing a bad guy. You don't really, you play him as a bad guy.
Part of the casting for me as Tom Sawyer was easy to play because I was very mischievous. On the set, I played pranks and jokes and that all the time. So when it came down to, you know, the famous scenes like painting the fence and having to con people to paint the fence for me.
Say, Tom, can I whitewash a little?
It was relatively easy. It was something that I could do without really working too hard. And it is a very memorable scene in the fact that I just played myself. It was that simple.
It was like watching some kind of magic. The way Tom kept collecting and the kids kept working. And there never was a fence that got whitewashed so fast.
Well, one of the things that I remember back in the days when we were actually shooting the show, we were shooting a situation where the raft was going to be rammed by a riverboat.
What's that?
It's a riverboat.
In the shooting of this particular ramming of the raft by the riverboat, you see, they became a little too close. They got a little too close to the oncoming riverboat.
Jim, they're coming right down on us. Oh!
You don't have brakes on the raft. They got so close to each other, some of the folks bailed. They actually jumped off of the thing into the water. And yeah, they had a tale to tell about that one.
Where this studio was situated was on a mountainside north of North Vancouver. And basically behind the studio where we had the street built out in the back lot was mountain. And the wildlife is very active, you know, there's cougars and bears around there, and once in a while in the summer months they're coming down to integrate with the humans, rooting through the garbage and whatnot, like Yogi Bear.
Sammy went out of the studio and came in and said, "Hey Tom, I just fed my apple to a bear."
Mm-hmm. You know, bears like food, and I had an apple.
I said, "Come on, Sam, don't kid me. This is not possible, and don't kid around here." So he grabbed my hand, and I went out to the Panorama studio. And surely enough, in the back, where we had a container for the food left over from the kitchen, a big brown bear was sitting right on top, and I was absolutely shocked.
I think I got reprimanded for that.
With such distractions put aside, the cast and crew knew their mission was to bring Mark Twain to the screen.
I knew that both Mark Twain books have never been produced. And I thought this would be a new situation to have both Mark Twain books in one serious film.
It was a good complementary situation. You could read the book, you could read chapters of the book and watch episodes of the show, and it was broken down in such a way that it really did feel like chapters.
Everybody likes Mark Twain, you know. Kids like Mark Twain, grandmothers like Mark Twain.
And it's amazing that people still remember this show 20 years later, to the point of where they're still sending us letters or having fan clubs out there.
And I think, though, it probably is more popular worldwide.
The show has done phenomenal. I have received fan mail from almost everywhere.
And I did receive, quite a few letters over the years through the agency here that from Scandinavian countries and from Britain and from Germany, from kids over the years about how much they enjoyed the show. So I really, over time, began to recognize that it did have an impact.
I've heard from a few people that have seen it in different countries that they just absolutely love the show. Love the show. Watch, I'll bet you they'll become a cult classic. Yeah.